Hi there, we're live. It's 7 p.m. on a Saturday in the UK, and it is the 28th of July. And in the backstage area, we've got the UK's top nutritionist, as seen on TV, Keto Pro Richard Smith. Here he is.
Good day.
Good day. How are you, Richard?
Yes, very well. Very well. You?
Yeah. I've been out in the sun. I
Me
think
too.
you look like you have. Yes. Yeah. So we've got questions. I mean, do you want to have a quick chat before we get into the questions, or do you want to dive straight in? It's entirely up to you.
Entirely up to you. Whatever you want to do, my man. Whatever you want to do.
Okay. Well, let's put our names at the top. That'll be the first thing, so people know who we are. And just to remind people, at the end of this, we're going to do an hour here on YouTube, and then we're going to do half an hour in our school community. So if you want to watch that extra, you have to join the school community, which is only $9. It's only $4 a month. $4 a month, which I think is pretty good. Right. Well, let's get into the comments then. Let's do that. Any advice? This is from Invite Wedding Guild, I think that is. Any advice to reverse a kidney cyst?
So I've worked with a client who had advanced polycystic kidney disease. Advanced polycystic kidney disease is meant to be irreversible. If you look at any literature, it will tell you that there's a degradation process of 5% year on year, and there's no coming back, basically, and it will only lead to a kidney transplant. This person reached out to me because they found information from, I don't know if it was America or Germany, whatever it was, but it was to do with the supplementation of exogenous ketones. And that's why they reached out to me. Now, the reason that the ketones have been tested is that ketones block inflammation. So they lower inflammation, and they're a preferred energy source by every cell in the body, bar 2 cells. And that includes the erythrocytes and the glutaminergic neurotransmitters in the brain, which can't use ketones for fuel because they do not have mitochondria. So that's where the conversation started. We looked at dietary changes. So we began to remove plant compounds, increase in protein, which goes against everything that we're told with the kidneys. I know Stephen has some fantastic research on this also. But inflammation, removing the compounds that are causing inflammation, which are typically things like the grains, fruits, alcohol, consuming the compounds that heal and repair the body, which is predominantly proteins and fats. And what we saw, to our amazement, after maybe 9 months in between scans, possibly longer, was that this polycystic kidney, the inflammation, the cysts, had stopped, the growth had stopped dead in its tracks. So we don't, looking at the images, but I'm not an expert in reading images, so take this as you will. It looked to me like they had begun to shrink. But again, I'm not I can't profess to be a professional in reading these images, but from a layman's perspective. But the official result was that they hadn't grown. Now, bear in mind, this is meant to grow 5% year on year. This has continued, so it's definitely possible to reduce polycystic kidney disease and improve issues with polycystic within the kidney. And again, to do this, it comes down to removing the compounds that are going to cause the problem. And again, plant compounds, fructose, alcohol, so on and so forth, and putting in and consuming the products that are going to allow us to heal and repair the body. Now, remember, every cell in the body is made of protein. Every cell in the body is made of fat. In fact, they are the 2 predominators out of everything that makes up the weight of a cell, bar water. Water makes up 70% of the weight of the average mammalian cell. The next, out of that 30%, 18 is protein. Then it drops down to lipid, which makes up 5. Polysaccharide, which is a stored version of sugar, only makes up 2%. And then we've got the minerals and DNA, RNA, and so on and so forth. So proteins and fats need to be predominated. Blocking that inflammation is the key to this. We need to remove the inflammatory compounds. And there are many. This is why living a ketogenic and carnivore lifestyle will confer a benefit, I believe. And that's where the supplementation of the MCT and the BHB came into play. But bearing in mind, when we are ketogenic, we produce these naturally. all we were doing with the supplementation of the exogenous ketones was increasing the level of the ketones in the body just to further assist with blocking those pathways. But yes, I mean, look, follow an evolutionary appropriate diet, remove the toxic compounds, get rid of the seed oils, the fruits, the veg, eat an animal-based lifestyle predominantly, if not wholly. And I'm fairly confident that we will see some improvement. But again, we can't give medical advice. This is purely for educational purposes. But I can only speak to or from my personal experience in regards to clients that I've worked with. And this is what we've seen in an advanced polycystic kidneys situation.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, that I'm going to just echo what you just said. We're talking about personal clinical experience, but with lots and lots of people, absolutely. Just to give you the mainstream view, depends on the size of the cyst and whether there's any symptoms. If it's small and there's no symptoms, they tend to say it's going to be benign and not worry much of a problem. They put it down to aging. Just, they're very blasé about it. If you've got a cyst, you've got a cyst. I'm assuming you got some symptoms. If you got symptoms, then you want to do something about it. And I think that's what I've seen from this way of eating, that people do have the symptoms. It's normally like a pain in the back or the upper abdomen, sort of the area that you would expect. If it becomes infected, then you can get a fever. So there's, it's not great. High blood pressure can sometimes be caused by it. So if you've got symptoms, then you can go to the doctor and get it checked out. They use a needle to do aspiration, is what they call it. Basically they can drain it. And there's other treatments as well. But this way of eating seems to be very successful. Polycystic ovary syndrome, and I've had people on dialysis talk about kidneys, and there's so much that is allegedly not reversible, chronic and progressive, which actually we see reversal of. And as Richard was very careful to say, no progression is also another thing. If you stop it in its tracks from getting bigger, that is a win, because they're expecting a sort of 5% increase every year. So even if you have no symptoms now, if you leave it and you keep eating the wrong things and having systemic inflammation and other things, then you might be okay now, but maybe in 2 or 3 years you won't be. So I think this way of eating is a really good way of giving your body the best environment to fix. But that's just for information, educational purposes. If you need to see your doctor, don't forget that you should. Right. Okay. So we've got Zinc, I think is the name there. 69 days in and feeling super fatigued and weak. I know there is an adaptation process, but really struggling. Tried electrolytes, more fat, more meals, less meals, fasting, looking forward to fat adaptation. I'm assuming there's a question in there. How do we get over this super fatigued, weak feeling? 69 days in is still relatively early. It's not even 10 weeks. Or it's just under 10 weeks by day. So I would say you might have actually been trying too many different things too soon. And maybe you could have ridden out that fatigue for a couple of days. So, Rich, what do you think?
Yeah, look, it's, we see this time and time again. Coming back to something that you've mentioned recently, is that we see all of the success stories online, and they are incredible, and they should be there. And rightly so. But these are stories from people who are coming from a very sick place, clinically obese, type 2 diabetic, suffering with severe chronic fatigue and depression. And when we make these subtle changes, usually 2 to 3 weeks in, they start to see a benefit. More active people seem to take a lot longer to adapt. Sports people in particular, unless they do specific training, they will really struggle to adapt, because it's more noticeable. They have metrics to follow. They track with their Garmin, so they have their heart rate and their zones to train to, and they will see a massive impact on athletic performance. So where you're coming from will make a big difference. But typically, Stephen and I have thrown various different time periods around, since we've been broadcasting. I've seen people adapt in as little as 3 months, 12 weeks. The average seems to be 6. I took 12. I took 12 months. So I noticed fantastic benefits early on, big weight loss, but I was suffering with fatigue. The depression and the anxiety was still there for much of this as I was adapting into the lifestyle. So look, there is an adaptation process. I understand that it can be incredibly disconcerting when you make all the changes and you don't see these things. But somebody within our school group recently was saying the same thing, that they'd struggled for quite some time not seeing any of the benefits that others had reported. But this person was coming from a fairly healthy background, but just looking to optimize health and well-being. So what we did with them is we introduced MCT, C8 MCT, which I stock, I manufacture. Mine is the world's highest purity, by the way, 99.9%. This isn't a sales pitch. C8 is a medium chain triglyceride. It has the ability to convert into ketones through the hepatic portal vein incredibly quickly, which the long chain fatty acids do not. There are two types of MCT, C8 and C10. C12 is half an MCT, and I say that because half is absorbed through the normal process, and some smaller portion is taken through the hepatic portal vein. So I don't really count C12 as an MCT, although the benefit to C12 or lauric acid is increased cholesterol, which again we can get into as we go on. But look, the C8 is a fantastic compound that will instantly convert into ketones and supply superior energy to the brain, the body, and the heart. So it could be a case of the type of fats you're consuming. Maybe they're too slow and too sluggish to create energy and allow you to create ketones and use them efficiently. This adaptation process, when we start to produce ketones, we waste many of them in the form of acetoacetate and acetone. We breathe them out and we pee them out. This is what we detect on the breath monitor and on the urine strips. And that's great. It's a sign that we are burning fat, but we're burning fat inefficiently, if you like, or at least the utilization of the ketones is inefficient, because as we adapt, the body doesn't waste as many ketones through acetone and acetoacetate, and it will predominate beta hydroxybutyrate. This is why if I were to test my blood or my breath or my urine for ketones, I would show incredibly low, if any at all, because my body is creating them at such an efficient level and it's using them at such an efficient level. There's very left in the urine, breath, or blood. So there is an adaptation process. C8 oil can fast track this process. It allows the signaling of the beta hydroxybutyrate to upregulate the monocarboxylate transporters and enzymes BDH, ACAT, and SCOT, which are the enzymes within the cells in the muscle that allow us to use ketones for fuel. So you could try that. You could try further upregulating through intense workouts, HIIT type training. HIIT training is a fantastic way to upregulate the monocarboxylate transporters. It's incredibly difficult to do this early on because you're going to hit these sessions sprinting, or rowing is what I would recommend initially to start with, because there's no impact on your legs. If you're not used to running, trying to do sprinting can cause issues, as I found when I started running last year. So rowing is a fantastic way. Just get on, smash out a couple of 100 meters, or do whatever you can. And over time, this will signal the body to upregulate those things. But there are lots of levers to pull, still lots of levers. Without looking into detail in regards to what you're consuming, it is difficult to give a more in-depth answer. Pop into the school group if you're not already in there, and we can get into this in far more detail with coming back and forth. The school group's fantastic. It's a Zoom setup. There's usually 20 people on the live, but it's a fantastic way just to ask for advice and for us to come back with alternatives, things maybe you've tried, things you haven't. It's very difficult on the live because of the amount of questions that we get, but that's what I would try to implement. Maybe some HIIT training, or put some medium chain triglycerides in.
Yeah, that's good. Just so you know, protein takes 5 times the amount of energy to digest compared to carbohydrates. So just the fact you're eating more protein takes a bit more energy, and you're adapting to this way of eating. So there's a picture of me behind me where I won a tennis tournament. So let's say you've never played tennis before, okay? And you went out and you played tennis with me, and you've never ever played. And I'm going to use this analogy for all the different things you tried. If you've never played and you're playing someone that can play okay, you would have a terrible time if that player played flat out and didn't help you adapt and just said, I'm going to play flat out. You've just got to catch up. And if a friend said, well, why don't you try a different racket? And the next time, why don't you try some different shoes? And why don't you try, different tennis ball? Why don't you try a different tactic? Why don't you serve underarm? You would be very tired, but more tired because you're trying all these new things as well, not giving yourself any chance to actually get into any sort of rhythm and actually work out how you're going to play tennis, because you're getting all this different advice. So this is what you're surrounded by. Influencers telling you 1 meal a day is the best thing, 2 meals a day is the best thing, 3 meals a day is the best thing, high fat's the best thing, high protein's the best thing. Go back to basics. Don't worry too much. Eating some steak, eating some fish shouldn't be such a stress. And I would just go to hunger, intuitive eating, don't overdrink, try to take coffee out of your diet, anything that stimulates you, or caffeine out of your diet. I think Richard is right there about exercise. If you're sitting there thinking, well, Richard doesn't know me, I can hardly get out of a chair. Well, then getting out of a chair is your intense exercise. And if you do it once a day, think tomorrow I'm going to do it twice a day. That's it. And the next day you can do it 3 times a day. Just very slow. And then if you imagine that, you would now be getting out of the chair 69 times a day from 1, if you did it once a day. So just slow adaptation. And yeah, you don't worry about getting the scar and it all being perfect within the first couple of weeks. There are some lucky people that does happen to, but that is not always the case. So I have got the next question. I can't believe this has come around so quickly. I've been starring them in the order that they're showing up. I might have missed one. Hey, Richard, what cross training are you doing for your running? Lifting legs? ? Also, do you take any sodium tablets during a half marathon?
Awesome question. So in regards to the cross training, no, look, all I'm doing currently, and I'm not even doing an awful lot of this, which I'm ashamed to say, is the running and cycling. But the running and cycling, I do different intensities. So the bike is another fantastic way to do HIIT style training. You can jump on the bike indoor or outdoor. You can cycle within a zone 2, a low intensity, and you can go flat out for 30 seconds. You can do an incredible session within 20, 30 minutes around the track or anywhere for that matter, just by doing sprint workouts and high intensity and coming back and doing lower zone work. And that's what I tend to do with my HIIT type training. So I'm not doing cross training, but Wednesday I train with a good buddy of mine, Mikey Davis, who is now #1 athlete in Ironman in Europe. He's the European champion. And just to put this out there, he was vegan when he came to see me a couple of years ago. He approached me in a conference that I was giving a talk in. He has since adopted this way of living. He's now predominantly carnivore. Fantastic athlete. Never podiumed in any competition, but always thereabouts. He's always been held in high regard as an athlete in Ironman. His first competition he ever won was the European Championship in Ironman a couple of weeks ago. And then he came back and in Port Talbot, he won a local triathlon there by 12 minutes, and he did it easily. So this is a person who was sold on the vegan lifestyle. But part of what we do is Wednesdays we do high intensity training. This is why I'm so sunburned, as our good buddy Dr. Abs has mentioned in the comments. I went running this morning. I did half a marathon this morning, as it happens, which comes into the second part of the question. Believe it or not, I have never run many half marathons. I've concentrated more on the lower end. So I've probably done maybe 5 or 6 half marathon distances since I've been running, 2 of which have come in the last 2 weeks. And the reason I'm doing this is to get more mileage in. So try to build the mechanical efficiency of my legs up. So I take electrolytes before I run. I don't need them when I'm running. And I take them after. And that's exactly what I've got in there now, some more electrolytes. So I don't use any during. I don't use tabs during. I don't even take water during a half. The beauty is we have the ability to not require any of these things, especially carbohydrate. Always fasted, 16 hours fasted, but always consume some electrolytes in some form before, but never during. Would I consume during a full? Potentially, but then the degree of effort that is put into a full is less per mile, if that makes any sense. So it becomes more endurance. We had some fantastic guests on the 24 Hour Live. Jake went into some of the benefits of dry fasting and how he competes with no fluid in his system at all. I can't do that. It doesn't. I've tried. It doesn't work for me. I do need some fluid in there, but we need a lot less than we're led to believe. And Stephen, I know, has some fantastic information on Boston marathons and runners that have been tested, and they're shown to be overhydrated at the end. So our requirement for water is a lot lower than we're led to believe. And I do believe as long as we have adequate electrolytes in the system and we are hydrated coming into that, we don't need anything. I don't drink any water or consume any electrolytes during 13.1 miles.
Excellent. So just some feedback on the answer you gave earlier. This is zinc. I'm currently on Lion diet, 180 grams of protein with around 240 grams of fat. 180 grams protein with 240 grams of fat. 190 centimeters tall, currently weighing 82 kilograms. So that could be one of the things. Maybe a bit too much fat in the diet.
Yeah, quite possibly. You carry on talking. I'll take a look at these figures now.
If you take 82 and times it by 2.2, we should get roughly what you should have protein and fat wise as a rough, rule of thumb. While Richard is doing that, I will point to these medals on the other side of my background, which is real, by the way. It's not a green screen, and they offer running. And I did 2 half marathons concurrently year after year. And the reason I tell you that is because I was a high carb athlete at that moment, and did okay on the first half marathon. Pretty happy with the time. I was very fit, and that was in Hastings half marathon down in East Sussex. Now, the following year, I was a bit blasé actually, and didn't get there early, and couldn't find anywhere to park, so I had to run 2 miles before I started my half marathon. So I literally was running from where I could park the car through the crowds and everything to get to the front, or get to the start. I wasn't at the front, and then actually bang, straight away I was running. So I actually did a 15-mile half marathon. What I would say is I found it relatively easy. You probably can tell from that story, because I was trained for 13 miles, but I did 15. But I would think now, the way I'm fueled, I would find it even easier. But I'm 60 now, and I was whatever that was, 45, something like that when I did it. So, right, let's get rid of Zinc's question. What was you going to say about those stats? Sorry.
What I would say, I mean, the fat looks a little bit, and this is all, we've got very little information to go on this. I think a private consult might confer more benefit to this, but the fat I think could be too high. Yes. I would consume a little bit less fat. I mean, I'd go closer to 200 for now. Try the MCT, try it first thing in the morning. You can, if you are drinking coffee, add it to coffee. I'm no longer drinking coffee, so I tend to add it to electrolytes. I mix it in, or I'll add it to the exogenous ketones. But maybe try it once a day, 1 scoop. So 1 scoop twice a day, early in the morning, first thing in the morning during a fasted state, and then maybe 2 to 3 in the afternoon. See how you get on. You've already got the product. The electrolytes are fantastic. They'll keep those in, and with a bit of luck, we'll start to see some transition. You could even incorporate also some of the omega-3s. Omega-3s, Lion is fantastic. This is how I live predominantly. Mostly lamb over beef now, but lamb is incredibly high in omega-3s. Omega-3s are fantastic for the body, especially when they come from lamb. Lamb, I genuinely believe to be, I don't want to use the word superior because they're both fantastic, but omega-3s work differently in the body as well to other fats, and they've got a far better fat profile in regards to the medium chain triglycerides, short chain, long chain, so on and so forth, and omega-3s. So you could implement some lamb potentially, but there we are. There's a few little hints and tips to maybe implement there.
Brilliant. Just want to say hello to Jonathan, Carnivore Muscles, popped in and said hello, and to Dr. Abs, who incidentally the first Thursday of every month possibly will be in the school group doing a special live question and answer about longevity and other things, because he's a thoroughly great bloke. And that's Thursday, the 1st of August, 8 p.m. only on the school community. Right, let's go to the next question, which is Jonesy Lad 142. Why do all the so-called fitness influencers keep saying calorie deficit is king?
Misinformed.
Now, yeah, yeah, that's a very polite word. If you want to know how good wood is at burning, what you do is you put it in a bomb calorimeter and you set fire to it, you combust it, and then you look at how much energy is needed to raise 1 liter of water by 1 degree centigrade. So that's a calorie. If you can spot what that's got to do with the human body, biochemistry and digestion and nutrition, then answers on a postcard, please, because that's what a calorie is. A calorie was to look at the efficiency of fuel. That's exactly what it is. It's just combusting, that's burning, setting fire to a sample of something and seeing how much it can raise the temperature of 1 liter of water by 1 degree centigrade. So if you want to go and experiment with putting some calories into some water, make sure you use a liter of water and measure the temperature. And let's say it's 20 degrees and you get it up to 100. You have just added 80 calories to that water, and it will weigh the same as it did when it didn't have that 80 calories put in. And do you know what? If you let it cool down and it loses 80 calories, it's going to weigh the same. Now, yes, that's not a perfect example because it's not a closed system. The kettle will let out steam and stuff. Well, that's what a body is. It's not a closed system. It's like that kettle. But a bomb calorimeter is a closed system. So everything to do with a bomb calorimeter is nothing to do with a closed system. Nothing to do with an open system. It is a closed system, and we are an open system. So is that kettle. So you couldn't really do that experiment, but that's what would happen if the kettle was like a bomb calorimeter and didn't let out any steam or any sort of vapor or whatever. So why do they say calorie deficit is king? Because they have no clue. It's a unit of heat. It's photon, has no mass. But food definitely weighs things. It definitely weighs. It definitely has some mass. So what else could we say about that? Well, protein makes things in the body, isn't just energy. Whereas carbohydrates don't really make anything. It's just energy. So they're completely different calories as well. If you're going to get into calories, then you've got to look at the differences between types of food. Fat makes some structure in the body, supplies some energy. That's it. So that's completely different to carbohydrates. It makes a lot more stuff. Doesn't make as much as people seem to think, but it makes a lot more. It's a precursor to hormones. Don't see carbohydrates doing that. So carbohydrates pretty much just energy. Fat is sort of a mixture of structure and energy, and proteins basically make structure. They are not the same. So 2,000 calories of salmon is going to be completely different to 2,000 calories of chocolate chip cookies. And you only have to look at that common sense argument there and say to yourself, well, hang on a minute. If you ate 2,000 calories of salmon every single day, or you ate in a calorie deficit 1,800 calories of chocolate chip cookies, who's going to look the best? Who's going to be the healthiest? I guarantee it's not the chocolate chip cookies, although it would lower your LDL cholesterol. So there you go. Right.
But which isn't a good thing.
which isn't a good thing, which is sort of the proof, isn't it? Because, you've got Nick Norwich did the lowering his LDL by eating Oreo cookies. And it did it, I think, 3 times as effective as a statin, but I'm not going to get into that. Right. Did you want to add any more? Shall we go on to the next question?
Yeah, only really quickly. I mean, if we look at a bowl of muesli, for example, that contains 500 calories, or bacon and eggs that contains 500 calories, that muesli is going to signal a 5 times stronger insulin response than the bacon and eggs. And this is the effect of the lectins. The lectins within these compounds will bind to insulin receptors and cause a higher insulin response. By that, what I'm saying is if you eat a bowl of muesli over bacon and eggs, you are going to store more fat. Carbohydrates store fat. When we consume glucose, it upregulates lipoprotein lipase. This breaks the bonds on the glycerol backbone and sends fatty acids into the fat cell. So basically, whenever we eat carbohydrates, the body goes into fat storage mode. In order to burn that fat or free those fatty acids from the cell, we need another enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase to break these bonds and perform this thing in reverse. Unfortunately, when insulin is elevated, insulin blocks that body's ability to do so. So it not only signals the body to store fat, but it prevents us from burning, which means if you were to consume carbohydrate before going for a run with the intention of burning calories, you were not burning or burning fat, sorry, you are not burning any body fat while your insulin is elevated. You need the insulin to be suppressed in order to burn body fat for fuel. The issue with many people is once they become insulin resistant, if I was to consume carb, my insulin would come up and then it would come back down. People who are insulin resistant seem to have a mountain effect. This insulin stays elevated for far longer and longer and longer, which means they can go hours and hours and hours between the foods they eat and still be in fat storage mode. This is why we all know someone who is clinically obese, absolutely huge, and swears they don't eat much, and we think that they're forbidden, but they're not. They're not. This just because they're insulin resistant, their body is constantly being told to store that fat. So reversing insulin resistance is key to this. But it just adds weight to the fact that a calorie is not a calorie in respect to how it operates and works within the body. You try eating nothing but meat. You go on an all meat diet, and I challenge you to gain as much weight as you can. It's incredibly difficult, and I've tried. I'm not saying you can't gain weight by doing so, but it is way harder than you would think. And I would put it out there that if you were to implement that you would in fact lose weight, regardless of the caloric value, to a point.
And Andrew Scarborough there is saying, what if I identify as a bomb calorimeter? Well, if you do that, Andrew, good luck to you, mate. Right. So we got the next question. I think we covered that one pretty good. Carsten. Hello, Stephen and Rich. Why is fat metabolism stroke ketone superior versus glucose regarding getting the energy to move and also regarding cell mitochondrial health? Good question, Carsten.
Fantastic. So look, glycogen is expensive. Glycogen needs to go through a lot of steps in order to create energy. So stored glycogen is released through glycogenolysis, becomes glucose, and then it's sent to the target cell where it enters the GLUT1 and 4 transporter. So GLUT4 predominantly, but it can be 1. Then it goes through a series of steps where it's converted into glucose 6-phosphate. What's after that? Fructose 6-phosphate, phospholipyruvate, so on and so forth. And then there's 10 enzymes by memory involved with this stage of going through in order to go through the mitochondrial pyruvate complex, create pyruvate, acetyl-CoA, and then this enters the citric acid cycle and goes through oxidative phosphorylation and creates energy. Fats make up the cell. Fats don't need to be sent to the cell. They make up the cytoplasm of the cell. They don't need to enter a transporter, so they're already readily available. Fatty acids have far less work to do in order to create energy. The fat acetyl-CoA goes through a carnitine shuttle. Carnitine palmital transfers 1 and 2, becomes acetyl-carnitine during the process. And then the acetyl-CoA enters beta oxidation, where we create the acetyl-CoA to enter the citric acid cycle, and then goes into oxidative phosphorylation. So through a fat burning process, through beta oxidation, it's far more efficient. And we do this, and people quite often question about ketone levels, which is a whole other topic. I'm not producing ketones, but we can still perform beta oxidation. It's a far easier process. Now, that's number one. But when we do this, and we get to the point where we need to create glucose. Glucose needs to be produced in the body. There are cells in the body that need glucose. The red blood cell, or the erythrocyte, and the glutaminergic neurotransmitters in the brain, they need glucose, but the body makes these through gluconeogenesis. In order to do so, we need oxaloacetate. So oxaloacetate is used up in the citric acid cycle. Acetyl-CoA will build up, and then that will enter the HMG-CoA pathway, and then ketone production. This, when it enters the ketone production, is far more efficient in regards to utilizing energy. We get far more energy for the ketones, and far less damage is caused also. Part of this process is the conversion of NAD plus into NADH. Now, when we process one glucose molecule, it costs the body 4, not 3, 4 NAD plus in order to convert ketones or beta hydroxybutyrate. Cost the body 1. Now, why is this important? Because we need NAD plus. NAD plus levels decline as we age. But what this shows is the ketone production is 4 times or 400% more efficient at producing energy. And by doing so, causing far less inflammation and oxidative stress along the way. So those are 2 reasons, basically. The beta oxidation process and the fact that we can use ketones at that level and cause far less oxidative stress through that process is why ketones are way more, I was going to say better, doesn't sound good, way better at producing energy than glucose. Glucose causes damage. It causes glycation and it can cause oxidative stress. Plus, the source of most glucose is usually things like breads and pastas and so on and so forth. These contain lectins and phytic acids, which block the absorption of other nutrients. And by doing so, the phytic acid can block the absorption of zinc by as much as 100%, for example. We need zinc to produce testosterone, to heal and repair. But the phytic acid and the lectins can also block the absorption. They bind to the microvilli on the enterocytes lining the gut, and they reduce the surface area. By doing so, reducing the amount of nutrients that we consume, which means that the body is now high in energy that we're consuming, but low in nutrients. So this leads to a nutrient deficiency, which leads to hunger, which leads to more eating, and then more of these compounds that contain these toxic things that are causing much issues within the body, the vegetable oils, oxidative stress, the glycation, so on and so forth. At a basic level, this is why living this way is far more efficient, because glucose is damaging to the mitochondria. Fructose is damaging to the mitochondria. Fructose depletes ATP. It's the only sugar that is fermented. And as we know, there's a fermentation process that Andrew, who's listening, will know all about in regards to fueling cancer, because cancer cells lose their ability for oxidative phosphorylation. So they go through they send glucose through a fermentation process in order to fuel those cells. Fructose is already in that state. This is the pathway that it goes through. So this is why consuming these foods is absolutely counterintuitive to being fit and healthy, energy production, and so on and so forth. And also, just to add to that as well, when we consume these medium chain triglycerides that we've mentioned from supplementation form, these are compounds that are found in animal proteins anyway. So they're there, they exist in animal proteins. All we are doing is extracting these so we can use them at a higher level. MCTs do not store in the body. So when we consume them, the caloric value, coming back to calories, is irrelevant almost, because of the way that they absorb. But MCTs and omega-3s don't store as well in the body also. The body uses them, it doesn't store them. When we are consuming lots of carbohydrates, we're constantly eliciting that insulin response, and we're constantly signaling the body to store fat within this growth phase, overactivating and expressing things like IGF-1, which will stimulate an mTOR activation and can lead to lots of other illnesses and diseases, which is through the activation of IGF-1, by the way, and not mTOR. And that's probably a talk for another day. But yeah, a few reasons there. Basically, living this way is far more efficient. Ketones and even fat are far more economical fuels than glucose.
That's really good, Rich. I'm going to just add a couple of really basic ones. I mean, energy storage, gram for gram, fat stores twice as much energy, over twice as much energy as glucose molecules. So you get sustained energy. So you can run longer without having to top up on your energy. And also weight management is better when you are fat oxidizing rather than running on glucose, and your stable blood sugar levels. So I think people actually know, going back to the stupid C word, everybody knows that fat has 9 calories per gram and carbohydrates have 4. I know that's not really true, but that's sort of very ballpark sort of thing to talk about. So there you go, gram for gram, you've got 9 units of energy in fat compared to 4 in carbohydrates. So there's many reasons why it's superior, but a great question. This feels like a plant. This question feels like it's been planted, but it isn't. It's a real question from Matthew. What time does the Carnivore Conference UK start on Saturday, the 14th of September?
Fantastic question, Matthew. This first speaker, who I think is going to be me, is on at 9 a.m. But I mean, the doors will be open from 8. There's going to be maybe even earlier, but I'm sure it's open from 8, so we can get in and grab some water, a coffee if you're still drinking coffee. Breakfast is available also. So I mean, we may actually be opening the doors prior to that. I will find out if we're having breakfast, because there are 3 meals included that day. I'm sure that we may be opening prior to that, but it's Many of the guests.
Can you put a link in the chat?
I most certainly can.
Yeah,
I most certainly can. So this is going to be a fantastic event.
Many of the guests, sorry, I cut you off, which is very rude, but I wanted to just make sure people could look at the website. You were going to say?
Yeah, so many of the guests have already booked accommodation, because the venue that we're holding this in is a fantastic venue in the Peak District, and it's in Cliff College, surrounded by some fantastic countryside. Incredible place to be, but we've booked the whole venue, so it's only us there. It's full of accommodation, single rooms, double rooms. So many of the guests there have booked accommodation. The speakers are there. So the speakers are there for the whole weekend. So it's an opportunity for you to chat and mingle with the speakers after and outside of their talks. So come and plague them. I'm sure they love that. But it's a brilliant way to, it's all well and good giving a consultation, giving a public speaking event. Speaking with the speakers after, for me, in the last event that I went to, was fantastic. It was a brilliant opportunity for me to mix with the attendees and the guests who came. I've made some incredible friends, and it's brilliant to exchange personal stories and nutritional facts and so on and so forth. But I'm going to pop a link there. But we've got some incredible speakers. Myself and Stephen are speaking. We've got Dr. Abs, who was in the chat. He is also speaking on day 2. We've got Carnivore Muscle, who was on. Carnivore Muscle is speaking. Jonathan. We've got Ben Hunt. We've got Phil Escott. And there are others. Who am I missing? I'm going to pop a link below, and you guys can check that out. But there are different pricing options available.
Let's move on to the next question, because we're running out of time, which is, this is a fun one, I guess. Matthew, if you had to eat one plant food, what would you choose? I would eat a banana.
What would you go for, Steve?
Really, I don't know. I've got to be honest with you. Yes, I'm glad Jonathan isn't on, because he tells me off for not being precise, but I really don't know. I suppose I really don't know. Maybe an avocado, which isn't really a fruit, is it? I don't know.
Well, he has said plant.
He said plant. It's all rubbish. I mean, over the weekend I had sirloin on the bone, right? And wow, gorgeous aged meat. It was just so good. There's not one plant food I really want. Sorry, Matthew. Sorry. Even if I had to, I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Do you know, me too, but if I had to, I would go for the least toxic. So avocado would probably be on there. If I wanted to eat a plant for a carb source, it would be white rice, because white rice is lectin free. I do genuinely believe that to be one of the best sources of carb if you are going to put carb into your diet. But it is jam-packed with carbs, so it will pull you from a ketogenic state if you're not adapted. But yeah, probably might. Berries, potentially, they're also lower on the toxicity scale, depending on how many you eat. But this is exactly what I'll be talking about in the Carnivore conference. So I will be speaking about foods, or non-foods even, and vegetables and fruits and the toxic compounds that they contain, and how much that we would consume of said compound it would take for us to cause severe damage and even death. And I think some of these figures will shock many of you. And I don't know if it's been done before. So I think it's going to be a first. I'm literally going to show you in person, this much of this compound will kill you. Probably not the best thing to be showing an audience of people, just in case they don't get on with their partners and so on and so forth. But it's going to be it's going to be an eye opener. You'll be surprised how many toxic compounds are found within these non-foods.
Brilliant. Let's get on to the next question. This is unusual. I've never heard this question. How do you know you're salt adjusted? I will tell you my views on salt. Your body has this fantastic thing called the tongue, and if something is too salty, you tend to go, wow, that's too salty. And I think we've got to get back into being a bit more intuitive with salt. You can salt your food and think it's fantastic, but I would say you have to look at what it's doing to you. So your skin might get worse, for instance. I think the steak and butter gal, cut salt out and improved her skin no end. In addition to carnivore, she really reduced her salt. But I think it's very individual. I don't think there is a sort of test you can do other than the taste test that I just spoke about. And if you crave it, that's also interesting. Obviously, you possibly will be needing it for some reason. Your body's saying you need it. But in the end, it's a mixture of your taste buds, your cravings, and your reaction to it, I think.
Yeah, spot on. I go along with that.
Okay, good. It's a good question. Right, Maggie May. 45 years old, 3 months, high fat, moderate protein, been told in menopause, okay, just under a year, no cycle, on BHRT, but periods have started again. Should I come off BHRT? Will body make its own hormones after BHRT? Yes, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, for people that don't know. We can't give you medical advice, but if your cycle has come back, what does that indicate? Indicates that your body is producing those hormones. Do you want your cycle back? That's the next question. There's too many questions there, Maggie. I think I wish I'd never seen your face. So I had to say that because it's Maggie May, isn't it? Rod Stewart. I'm guessing from the question you want to get off the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. There's too much to that question that's personal, I think, to be able to give you an answer. That would be a consult, I think, unless Richard's got something more sort of general we can say.
Yeah, look, I agree completely. But look, what does this tell you? Living this way of life is the way the body is meant to be. We see it time and time again. People who adopt this lifestyle, their hormone function comes back. A client of mine, a good friend of mine now, actually, his sister had been trying for IVF, and we've mentioned this a couple of times previously, for I think it was something like 5 or 7 years, and unsuccessfully. Friend of mine kept on passing on advice and podcast of Stephen and I and various other influencers on YouTube in regards to adopting this way of living for hormonal health and so on and so forth. And they decided to go carnivore. 10 months in, they are now pregnant. This is the power of the lifestyle. It's not a miracle lifestyle. There's nothing magic about what goes on with this. We are simply removing the toxic compounds that are causing much of the problem within the body. And we're giving the body everything that it needs to heal and repair and thrive and not just survive. And again, just to reiterate, protein and fat makes up every cell in the body. We should always be predominant in protein and fat. Only 2% of the cell is polysaccharide. Yet, as a diet percentage, we predominate carbohydrate we would not have consumed in excess during our evolution period, and we know this through testing, bone testing. I think it goes back to the I can never remember it, but it's basically 1.5 to 2 million Australopithecus, I think it is, Stephen's name. 1.5 to 2 million years ago, we were shown that we were predominantly animal based, and even up to 40,000 years ago, that we know this is solid evidence. A percentage of the nitrogen found in measurements can give us an indication of the amount of animal proteins we were consuming. Somewhere between 0 to like 5 or 6% would be maybe predominating a vegetable-based diet. 6 to 10, and these figures are rough, I can't remember them completely, would give an indication of a carnivore-based lifestyle. It may even be up to 12%. And I think the study's shown that 40,000 years ago, we were at a percentage of 13%. So we weren't just carnivore, we were hyper carnivore. Basically, every opportunity that we had, we would have been consuming animal proteins. Vegetables would have been consumed, or plants, I should say, would have been consumed during times of famine and for survival. So plants are survival foods. They're not thriving foods. They contain lots of endocrine disruptors. If we look at things like broccoli, for example, broccoli is high in a compound called sulforaphane, which we're told is incredibly good for us. Sulforaphane is an isothiocyanate, which competes for absorption of iodine at the thyroid, basically prevents us from making thyroid hormone. It blocks thyroid peroxidase. And then we look at other plants that we consume on a daily basis, things like spinach and kale and so on and so forth. These are all high in things like flavonoids and polyphenols. Flavonoids are a known endocrine disruptor. They will activate the 17B estradiol receptor, which will block thyroid peroxidase, which is the second step basically in us producing T3. So these compounds are not there for human evolution and survival. They were purely there for thriving. And once we remove the plants and we're consuming highly nutrient dense foods that the body needs, the body seems to go back to its natural state, and we begin to produce the things that we weren't able to do so prior.
That's a brilliant answer. Well done, Rich. Thank you so much for that. Let's go on to the next question. Maggie, if you want to book either of us for a consultation, we are available to be booked for that. You can look at my website or Richard's website, or join us on School, actually, which is just $4 a month. And you get 9 courses as well, all about keto, free ebooks, courses about thyroid, protein, everything is there. Right. Plucky Underdog is saying, hi, gents. Currently 1 month into Carnivore. Welcome to this way of eating. OMAD, which is 1 meal a day for people that don't know. Beef, butter, ghee, tallow, eggs, raw dairy. Also adapting at the moment. And my belly doesn't like me too much, but I'm guessing it can take months. Yes. I mean, my rule of thumb is 26 weeks plus or minus 6 weeks to adapt. So that's half a year. The worst, longest period of adaptation I've had is 1 year. The most miraculous thing was somebody losing a ton of weight, getting off all their medications, including metformin, in 7 weeks. I mean, just incredible. So I can't tell you anything other than, if your belly is not liking you too much, could it be that you are having rendered fat from the beef? For instance, some people go into ground beef, or mince as we call it in the UK, and they cook their ground beef, and then there's the fat in the pan, and they tip that back on, and that can be problematic for many people who are starting this way of eating and they have a tummy upset. So again, that's one of the reasons you could join the school, because that's a question where there would be probably 15, 16 people giving you different possibilities to what happened when they went to this way of eating. So that's my 2 penneth. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, fantastic. I completely agree. I think the amount of information there is incredibly limited, but what I would suggest potentially, if you are suffering with a stomach upset, is reduce the fat a little bit, as Stephen says. The meats you can cook in their own juices, just cover them up and they'll cook in their own juices and heats. The raw dairy, potentially, the casein can still cause intestinal permeability. But what happens when we go from eating a diet that is high in carbohydrate is the gut microbiome, the gut bacteria goes through a process of die-off. Basically, the gut microbiome is geared up to processing the foods or the environment that we put it in. When we start to put proteins and fats in, there's a die-off process. It can cause gastro distress and stomach upsets and toilet problems, but it does adapt. But it does take time. The second problem or issue potentially is excessive amounts of fats and bile production. So we are now consuming fats that we weren't previously. Bile production is ramped up. Bile is usually reabsorbed in the small intestine, but in cases of coming into the lifestyle and being new to it, the bile production or reabsorption isn't efficient. This mechanism isn't upregulated enough, so the bile travels down to the colon and can lead to toilet problems. So try reducing the fats a little bit, but keep pushing forward. Either way, your body will adapt eventually, because this is what your body loves and wants. But again, as Stephen said, different adaptation processes and periods.
Absolutely. That's great. We're getting near to the end of this show. Like I say, if you want to see the rest of your questions answered, we will be doing it in the next half hour in the school community. Right. You could have super chatted actually to jump the queue as well. But anyway, here we are. Right, let's do the next one. We have got Mafwanmi. Hi, 54-year-old female, carnivore, almost 1 year. I always work out fasted, but sometimes don't feel hungry after heavy lifting. Am I limiting muscle growth if I don't eat after working out? Thanks, Lucy.
Most definitely not. So look, it's the activation of mTOR complex 1 that's going to allow us to elicit an anabolic response and grow muscle. Training will do this, which is environmental, which is where the environmental hormesis thing comes into play. The second way is through carbohydrate. This will activate mTOR via IGF-1, which we do not want. consuming a bolus of protein, around 40 to 50 grams of protein. And that is protein, not weight of meat. Multiply by 4 or 5 times to get to that amount. 6 eggs would be 36 grams of protein, but enough to contain 3 grams of leucine. And leucine is the key to this mTOR activation. We need at least sort of 1.5 grams or 1,500 milligrams, ideally 3,000 milligrams or 3 grams, again, found in 6 eggs. You've activated mTOR by training, so that's fantastic. If we were to wait 3.5 to 4 hours before we consume a meal, then we're going to benefit from the mTOR reset. So mTOR starts to come back down. Now we consume food, and now we're sending another anabolic signal to heal and repair and grow. Protein is constantly in your body. We're not going to be short of any essential nutrients to heal and repair, within that window. This whole anabolic window is a myth. We do not need to consume food straight after eating. You can do, but for me, it's we're wasting an mTOR activation. So ideally, train fasted, eat 3.5 to 4 hours after that. You could eat 3.5 to 4 hours after that. And again, if you wanted to, which would give you 4 mTOR activations, you don't have to. But no, in short, you do not need to eat straight after training. Wait 3.5 to 4 hours, consume adequate protein to elicit that mTOR response. You can also supplement with leucine prior to eating as well. So you could take in leucine. You could just drink that about 5-10 minutes before you consume your food. There are other compounds like HMB, but I'm not so convinced on the research with that. But topic for another day. So no, you don't need to eat straight after eating. Wait 3.5 to 4 hours and then consume your food.
Yeah, it is a topic for another day. We're nearly at the end there. We've got about 3 minutes. If you want to hear the rest of the questions that you put up answered, we will be doing that in the next half hour in the school community. If people want to know what I'm talking about when I say about what is the school community, it is a group of like-minded people, and you can join up. I'm just going to do a little screen share to just show you, and this is what will happen. You will get into this if you join, and it's $4 a month. Like I say, you will get a Monday night, every single Monday at 8 p.m. You get another hour of live question and answers. If you sign up tonight, you can go straight to the calendar, and you will then see that here's our live look right now, and then you got the one at 8 p.m. Then we are on Monday, 8 p.m. And of course, we've got Dr. Abs there, look, on Thursday, and then we'll have more lives over here as well. So it's great. And the classroom, just to show you, there are free keto courses, there are thyroid courses, dairy, fruit and veg, protein, problem solving, bookshelf, and the Fat Club as well. There's so much you can do here, and every one of these has like these free ebooks. So all the things we talk about, fully referenced and everything. And that's in the school community. I can't recommend it enough. Anyway, thank you for listening here on YouTube on this live. It's great. Thank you for all your questions. It's been a great pleasure to answer them. And Richard, is there anything you want to add before?
Yes, I've just remembered something I mentioned last week is that the comments that seem to go through my channel, because obviously we're funneling to this one channel, they don't seem to appear in the list of things there. But yeah, we'll have to look at that, I think, with me. But one of the ones that just caught my eye was a question in regards to Tadej Pogacar, the winner of the Tour de France, whether he's fat adapted and running on ketones. Well, we know that Jumbo-Visma use ketones. They use exogenous ketones. They are fat adapted, despite being sponsored by carbs. I work with a very good athlete who competes for a high-level team. I'm not allowed to mention his name because he can't have any association with being fueled by fat and running on ketones, because he will be kicked off the team because the sponsors don't want that. So it's very much financially driven, and I would argue that most athletes who compete at a very high level are either ketogenic or fat adapted, at least predominantly are using some form of ketones, but they're not allowed to talk about it. But
right,
we are.
And
Topic for
I think what you could do is do a screenshot of those questions that are not coming up on this feed, and we could do them in the next half hour. So anyway, thank you everybody on YouTube, and hopefully we'll see you over on the school group. Have a good evening. If you're not going to join the school group, have a lovely evening.
Thank you all.